All right, good morning. So we're going to start with a little bit of a warm up. I know that Monday's lecture was a lot of information, so we are going to start with a little warm up to just kind of get you thinking in that way again. So you've got 4 steps. You're going to need some staff paper. There's some in the back of your course pack. 4 things I would like you to do. First thing, I would like you to notate the whole tone 1 or whole tone odd collection. Any way you like. You can start at any pitch you want, but just notate the whole tone 1 collection. Then you are going to convert the scale that you notated into pitch class integers. Then you're going to perform this transposition, t negative 3, on your pitch class integers. And then for the last step, you're going to then convert those PCs back into staff notation. So go ahead and get started on that. If you have questions, just throw them in the chat, but take a couple of minutes and work through this little warm-up of sorts. Okay, so what I have up here is the first half. I wrote out a whole tone 1 collection and the pitch class integers. Now, a couple of things. You might have started your collection on any note of this collection. I'm assuming most of us started it on PC1. But if you did and you notated it as a C sharp, that is fine. If you have a D sharp instead of an E flat, that is fine. Any iteration of those pitch classes, whatever accidentals make you happy, is totally cool. But your PCs should be, in essence, the entire odd number collection. Make sure that you are labeling your 11 as an E. I know it's kind of like a weird, quirky thing to get used to. Now, I didn't write out the transposition because most of it's pretty easy. So I'm going to do almost all of these. Basic math, if you want to go that route. So you're subtracting 3. So I'm going to skip the very first one. But the rest of these, 3 minus 3 is 0, 5 minus 3 is 2, etc., etc. So I didn't do the transposition for pitch class integer 1 yet. And the reason is there are 2 ways you can go about it. If you remember, we're working in this mod 12 system, which makes math kind of weird. So let's say you're going to go the mathematical route. So you've got pitch class integer 1, and you are doing a t negative 3. So you're going to subtract 3 from that. 1 minus 3 gives you negative 2. Now, because we're in this mod 12 system, our pitch class integers have to be between 0 and 11. So we add or subtract 12 until we land in that range. So you could add 12 to this. Negative 2 plus 12 gives you 10, and we would label that as t. So that is a mathematical way to approach this, and that is totally fine. For some of you, you might not want to do extra math in your life. That's where your clock face comes in. There are a bunch of blank clock faces in the back of your course pack for this purpose. So I'm going to plot my pitch class 1, which would go on this node of the clock. So we've got a negative transposition number. That means we are going to move counterclockwise around the clock face. So I'm going to just move by 3 clicks counterclockwise. So 1, 2, 3, I end up here, and that is also pitch class integer 10. Either of those methods works great. It's whatever is most comfortable for you. Now we are going to convert this to notation, and I wanted to make a note of this as well because I saw it come up on the worksheet quite a lot. Please remember that these T numbers, it's not just telling you what type of math to do to your pitch class interval, it also reflects direction. So a positive T number means you are transposing upward, and a negative T number means you are transposing downward. So because of that then, and because of how I notated my scale originally, I am going to be transposing down by 3 semitones. So this T that I have right here, that's got to be an A sharp or a B flat that is below my original pitch. So, however it is that you notated this, just please go back and double check that your transposition, your t negative 3, went down instead of transposing up in the other direction. What happened on the homework was there were a couple of transpositions that um, gave you a few ledger lines, and people switched the direction to stay on the staff. So just keeping in mind that your negative t numbers are transpositions downward. And then from there, just filling in the rest of your pitches. Again, accidentals at your leisure. You could call this a G sharp or an A flat. It is totally up to you. And there you have it. So the big takeaways are remembering that you have two methodologies, the math way and the clock face way, to calculate your transpositions, and remembering that your negative t numbers transpose downward. Okay, what we are going to do today, there was no free write today because the piece we're doing is super, super short, and we're going to just kind of use it as a way to get used to integer notation and interval class notation, and to explore the whole tone scale a little bit. So if you would like to flip to page 37 in your course pack, you're going to see a song called The Cage by Charles Ives. This is also in your oral skills course pack if you're taking AS4, because we will likely sing this as a warm-up sometime soon if you haven't done so already. So we're going to give this a listen. As you can see, it's very short. A couple of notes before we listen. There is a literal note written at the very bottom of the page that says that all notes not marked with a sharp or a flat are natural. So just by eyeballing the score, it's a slightly unconventional score in that there's no time signature, there's no key signature, and there are also only 3 bar lines. So we've got one bar line here at the repeat sign. We've got a bar line down here, and then the very final bar line. So this is sort of like one big measure with 2 small measures on either end. Because of that, especially because that one big fat measure in the middle, accidentals do not carry over. So the accidental only affects the pitch to which it is directly attached. So keep that in mind. And I am going to play a recording of this for you. So we'll listen to it a couple of times because it is super duper short. So here it is. Okay, short and to the point. We're going to listen to it one more time, and I would like you to zoom your focus into the vocal line for me and see if you can figure out how this vocal line is generated and start kind of sketching out or labeling collections that look familiar to you. So here it is one more time. Okay, so what I'd like to do with this first is we are going to explore the vocal line. And the first thing I would like you to do in order to do that is throw some pitch class numbers on the notes of the vocal line. So it's not super long. I don't think this will take us too very long. So you are going to put pitch class integers on all of the notes of the vocal line. Once you've done that, that should really highlight what collections we're dealing with. So then start kind of bracketing off and labeling the collections. So let's take a few minutes and do that as a group. Okay, so even if you're not entirely done, let's take a look at what we have. Now, using the pitch class integers just really highlights the fact that we are jumping between whole tone collections. You have a string of even integers, it switches to a pocket of odd integers, and kind of back and forth. So we start out with whole tone even or whole tone 0. Since we don't have measures to speak of, I'm going to talk to you in terms of systems and notes. So between the second and third note of the second system, we switch to whole tone 1, and we do it via a half step in the vocal line. So again, this idea of accidentals only applying to their direct note becomes really important here because we have an F natural instead of the F sharp we started with. So with that half step in the vocal line, we switch collections. And we stay in whole tone odd until we get this agogic accent right here. And by agogic accent, I mean accent by duration. So the vocal line has been singing in eighth notes almost entirely. We had a quarter note here, but then we get this dotted quarter. And so that lends it a little bit of weight to us as listeners. And after that agogic accent is where we switch back to whole tone 0. And again, we do it via a half step in the vocal line. We hang it in whole tone 0 until we get a little break in the text with that eighth rest, and then we switch back to whole tone 1. And again, it's via a half step in the vocal line. Now, this pocket of whole tone 1 does have a kind of non-collection pitch, I'll call it. We talk about non-chord tones all the time in tonal music. This E right here that I have circled, the pitch class 4, it's a single even pitch class integer in a sea of whole tone 1, in a sea of odd integers. So there's a lot that brings us to that note that draws our attention to it. It's the highest note that the vocalist sings over the course of this piece. It again is distinct in its length, so we have another agogic accent on that note, and it is a non-collection pitch. So we are in whole tone 1 in this passage, and we just have this one sort of highlighted non-collection pitch. And then again, after this extended note on A, right after the bar line, as it were, we switch back to whole tone 0. And I want to make note that this is the only time that we do not move by half step to switch collections. The vocal line actually moves by something bigger than a half or whole step for the first time. And we get this interval class 3, this minor third, and that's how we get back to whole tone 0. Okay, so that's a quick crash through the vocal line. Now I want us to get a sense of the piano part, and I'm going to send you off into breakout rooms in a few minutes to kind of expound upon everything we're doing now. But let's get a general idea of the piano part. Now, to do that, I would like you to take a look at, let's say, these first 6 chords. So through here. And I want to know, just kind of in whatever terms you want to tell me, what is going on with the piano line? How is it constructed? How is it generated? So take a look at what's going on with those harmonies. I'll give you a couple minutes to kind of ponder through it. And if you're stuck, I want you to think about the fact that the whole tone scale is generated by a single interval. It's generated by the major second. what's going on the piano, each harmony is also generated by one single interval. So by looking at each of those block chords in the piano, can you tell me what single interval is generating that block of sound? Yeah, good. So stacked fourths, perfect fourths. Wonderful. So looking at these six harmonies then, each one is generated from the ground up by a perfect fourth. So there are no whole tone implications with the piano part. That is strictly for the voice. Yeah, so what Jake is saying here, five semitones, that's something really important that I want us to talk about. So first off, let's put a label to this. There is a full-on label and an abbreviation you can use for these types of harmonies. So these stacked fourths are something we refer to as quartal harmonies, and we label them in this way, Q sub 4. It just means harmonies generated by a fourth. They do not necessarily have to be all the same type of fourth. They don't have to be perfect fourths. You can have quartal harmonies or a combination of different types of fourths. These happen to be all perfect. And the reason that that is important for us today is what Jake mentioned. These particular harmonies are generated by interval class 5. So if you remember from Monday's lecture, we talked about pitch classes. We also talked about interval classes. Interval classes are just a fancy way of saying how many semitones. And interval class 5 is equal to what we in tonal music refer to as a perfect fourth. So every single one of these harmonies in the green box is generated by IC5. It is generated by stacking an interval class 5 over the next note. Now, I'm going to not make you hunt through the entire piece because that's not a great use of our time. So I will just spoil the surprise for you. There are 4 spots in this piece where the piano breaks from its Q4s. The first one is right here. The 2 rolled chords. And then there's another passage. I'm going to highlight this one in blue because it is a block of 3 chords. Now, can you look at those 3 chords that are highlighted in blue and tell me if there is a particular interval class that seems to be the generator of those 3 chords?
Would that be interval class 7?
Yeah, good. So if we look at these 3 chords that are highlighted in blue, most of us probably on first look are going to say as a bunch of perfect fifths stacked on top of each other, which is absolutely correct. We are going to put a couple of labels on this then. We had quartal harmonies up top. These are what we would call quintal. And we would label those as Q sub 5. So those Q subscript labels are something we use for quartal and quintal harmonies. These particular harmonies then, because it's all perfect fifths, they are generated by interval class 7. Now, if coming up with the interval classes, especially as I get bigger, is just like frustrating to you, I'll tell you my quick hack, and if it works for you, then cool. I think about the clock face. And I think, okay, I know that the pitch C is at 12 o'clock on the clock face, right? So then I think, okay, say I'm trying to figure out what the generating interval class is of those blue harmonies. I would say, okay, I know it's a perfect fifth. That's what my brain latches onto. So clock face, C is at 12 o'clock. Where's a perfect fifth above C? It's pitch G. So where's G on the clock face? It's at 7. So that's how I quickly generate interval classes. especially when they get a little bit bigger, and it's easy to confuse them. Okay, so now what I am going to do is send you off into some breakout rooms. There is a document that I'm going to put in the chat. It's the same Google Doc we used before, so everyone's links should work, and it will set you up with some prompts. And I am going to open up the rooms, about 3 people to a room, and as always, you are welcome to choose where you go. And take about, oh, when does this class end? 11, yeah, 10, 12 minutes. And if you do not get the pop-up, I will assign you manually. Okay, go forth. All right. So as always, was just kind of creeping on the Google Doc as you guys were working. And everything that I've written in purple came from some of the comments on the doc. So the first prompt was asking about why the whole tone collection for the vocal line. A lot of you commented on the sort of staticness of it, and a few people commented on the stepwise nature of the line and how that the vocal line being almost entirely of steps was a nice way of connecting to the what's going on in the text with the leopard just pacing back and forth. Um, and also, I saw a comment about the chordal harmonies in the piano being sort of reminiscent of a cage, the way they're sort of very mathematically almost stacked. So really good comments coming from the work you were doing. The question I asked about these chords that are highlighted in magenta and blue, you guys really got into, really tried to get into like what's going on with them. So someone commented that about the interval content of this first chord. So we have a chord based entirely on IC5, 7, and 9. Now, that may or may not mean anything to you. The IC5 is just the very top, so the perfect fourth is at the very, very top. Everything below is constructed on perfect fifths and major sixths, IC7 and IC9. Now, that might seem incidental to you, but think about this opening. So we've got these very densely packed chordal harmonies. Everything is perfect fourths. They're packed as tightly as they can get. And then right before the vocal line comes in, we get this harmony that is, just by looking at it on the page, you can see that it just takes up more space. It takes up more space temporally because it's a whole note, but it also takes up more space vertically. So at the end of this pocket of really tightly, densely packed harmonies, we get this repose where we open up kind of this way and this way in this sound by widening the intervals. And somebody else commented that this second harmony right here is a direct transposition of the first one. So we just did a T5 to it, we transpose it up by perfect fourth, and that leads us to this harmony. I saw some great comments about this particular harmony as well, this second fuchsia harmony, acting as kind of punctuation. So there's literal punctuation in the text right there with a semicolon. And that rolled chord also acts as a bit of musical punctuation and gives us a little bit of repose in that moment. A nice little moment of text painting here with the dotted quarter note happening right where right when the leopard stops pacing for a moment. And then let's jump down here. I have yet to receive this comment that I saw in the doc about the so we have 3 quintal chords, right? And it's right where the text is talking about the specific time that this boy has been spending there, 3 hours. And there are 3 Q5 chords. This is the first time someone has commented on that, and I've been teaching this piece for 5 years now. So really, really interesting detail there. And again, after all those Q4s, the Q5s just open us up a little bit. And think about that. We're talking about temporal expansion. We're talking about a long period of time. And the harmonies are getting long this way while we're there. and also highlighting that non-collection PC4. All right, last but not least, I am going to mention someone commented on the harmonic trajectory and said that the inconclusive feel of the end was really linked well with the text. The text ends with a literal question, and we sort of seem to go a little bit of nowhere for the duration of the text. Yes, I will post this score and my personal score up on Blackboard, so you guys will have access to it, definitely. So last thing is this chord that happens on Wonder. This is a big ol' mass of notes. And I was kind of watching as the doc was populating. Some people were going about it in terms of what pitch classes were involved. Some people were going about it in terms of what interval classes were involved. I really can't tell you what might be the best way to kind of approach this harmony. I saw one group was actually talking about the pitches that weren't there. So there are a lot of notes in this chord looking at what was missing. But one thing I do think is really interesting is if we take that entire harmony and we take stock of every single interval from note to note, we have tons of thirds and fourths and fifths and sixths. We do not have a single second. There are no steps in that entire harmony. So we've got this big rolled block chord without any steps in it. So the smallest interval class we have is IC3. And I think that is really interesting because at this point now, by the end of the piece, we have a vocal line that has existed almost exclusively in IC1 and IC2, right? We had one little baby IC3 right here. That was it. And then we have a piano part that seems to have purposefully avoided those interval classes. So the piano part is existing in these wider interval classes to juxtapose this vocal line that is packed so densely with just IC1 and IC2. So that's a just sort of closing food for thought for you guys. My original idea was to not have a discussion response option for this piece because I wasn't sure sort of what we were going to do with it. But you guys are my second class, and I actually might throw one up there because we've gotten some good talks out of it. So that I might end up making that assignment and putting it up on Blackboard today, but I'll post an announcement if I do. This score and my score will be up there. You do have a free write available for you on Friday regardless. We're going to tackle one more whole tone piece. So that free write for the WC is up there. Stay tuned on whether or not there's a discussion response for this one. Thank you guys for your wonderful work, and I will see you on Friday.